On November morning of 1953, impatient men started to flock around a beer joint in a remote neighborhood of Kyiv, dreaming of a mug of beer to help reduce the effects of a heavy hangover. Their hopes were in vain, though. The place was closed. One of the most feverish customers peeked inside to see a dead woman lying in a pool of blood. The victim was a bartender, Margarita Karatsupa, also known as Queen Margot. Her death was a result of a deep cutting wound on her throat. A tattooed flower was found on the victim's stomach. A woman with a tattoo was a very rare occurrence in the 50s in the USSR and could only mean her ties with the criminal world. A distinctive bloody palm print on the floor and a bouquet of daisies to the left of the body could be seen. Obviously, the attack was unexpected. A bottle of Armenian brandy and 2 glasses, one with traces of lipstick, led to the conclusion that the murderer enjoyed the bartender's favor. Her accounting book with a few small bills was lying on the counter. The lethal blow left no chances for the victim. The dissection of the carotid and trachea caused rapid blood loss. Most likely, the killer was a professional. During World War II, scouts would apply such strikes to neutralize guardsmen soundlessly. Detectives assumed that a war veteran had committed the crime. A rumor about the murder of Queen Margot quickly reached her workmate, who showed up at the crime scene at once. She had no idea who might have killed her, but said that their customers are diverse and include both ex-military and outright thugs. She recalled a recent incident when a drunk customer, Misha the sailor, demanded vodka from Margot. He had no money and left his watch as collateral. Margot recorded the 10-ruble debt in her logbook and warned that if he failed to pay it back tomorrow, the watch would be gone. The woman doubted that Misha could have killed over the watch. She added, however, that when the guy was drunk, he was unpredictable. Other frequenters added more details to the profile of Misha the sailor. The watch was his war award for bravery during his scout service. He was very proud of it. That's why, as soon as he sobered up the following morning, he ran back to Margot to claim it back, yet unable to repay the debt. The bartender refused to return the watch. The sailor lost control, and the bar customers had to save Margarita from the crazed alcoholic. It was typical for Margot to sell alcohol against collaterals. In her pursuit of revenues, she was not too picky. She dealt with petty crooks, lent money at interest, and didn't even feel squeamish about buying stolen items. The last record in her logbook was about Misha, the sailor. Her workmate noticed that an expensive brooch was missing from the victim's blouse. The last day's revenue, which generally amounted to 5,000 rubles, was not found either. It looked like the murder was committed with the purpose of robbery. Detectives coming over to Misha's place were met by his wife. Assuming that her husband returned as drunk as usual, she splashed water on one of the visitors. The officer went to the bathroom to put himself in order and saw a blood-stained sailor's robe soaked in a bowl. The wife explained that she came home from work last Thursday and found her husband dead drunk. She also noticed valuables missing and beat Misha up in outrage. That is where the blood comes from. He was checked into a hospital's traumatology ward. Detectives analyzed the timing. When the bartender was murdered, Misha was lying in a hospital bed. The suspicion had to be lifted. The coroner's report said that as a result of the lethal throat cutting, a knife blade penetrated the esophagus and trachea and missed the spinal cord. One of the detectives recalled his childhood experience of watching a Jewish butcher abiding by all religious rules, whereby an animal must be killed instantaneously with complete exsanguination. The information was found irrelevant, though. After total extermination by Nazis, such specialists were unlikely to survive in Kyiv. Alongside that, a bloody palm print was identified. It belonged to Sergei Kirsanov, who had a criminal record. Fearing an arrest, Kirsanov attempted to escape. Upon detention, officers found the sailor's watch and Margot's necklace on him. The valuable brooch remained missing, however. Even without it, though, the motive for the crime was evident. Kirsanov swore he had nothing to do with the murder and knew nothing about the brooch. He confessed to breaking into the pub after closing to steal some money and vodka. Bumping into the dead body, he freaked out and ran away. Half an hour later, he decided to come back, however. He tore the earrings and the necklace off the victim, grabbed money from the cash desk, and snatched a few bottles of vodka. On his exit, he slipped on the spilled blood, which explains the print of his right hand. He wanted to wipe his hand with the logbook page and saw the watch. Forensic experts established that Margot's torn earlobes didn't bleed. Her earrings were taken 10 hours after the murder. Further probes into the victim's entourage led the investigation to her lover, a bridge-building engineer, a.k.a. Gusman. The man was fond of fencing, which meant he was skilled in using cold weapons. The operatives failed to find him at home, but his neighbor explained that Gusman wasn't seen at home for 3 days. Earlier, the man had a nasty fight with his mistress, Margarita. The curious neighbor went out into the hall, pretending he was using the shared telephone. He didn't want to miss the passionate fight. Margarita, wearing a torn robe, tried to run away from the drunk Gusman, who attacked her with a knife. The neighbor had to intervene. He added that Gusman's rage was caused by jealousy. The quarrel erupted as a.k.a. blamed Margarita for cheating on him. During this conversation, a.k.a. showed up and immediately tried to escape. He was arrested and charged with Margarita's murder. But on the day of the murder, Gusman had an alibi. The bridge construction he was working on was about to end, and works were underway 24/7. The man was at the site, seen by everyone. He said his fights with Margarita were over her repeated cheating and showed a postcard he found in her stuff, reading "Kisses, Nathan." Detectives retrieved the postcard without hoping to find any fingerprints on it. But they were lucky. The glossy surface preserved fragments matching the fingerprints on the bottle of brandy. Her workmate was interrogated again. She didn't want to speak badly of the victim, but confessed that Margarita dated several men simultaneously. Besides the bridge engineer, there also was a colonel who was transferred to a far garrison a few weeks ago, and an unknown meat supplier, a war veteran. Not from Kyiv. He only came on weekends and always gave Margot bouquets of daisies. The detectives latched onto this information. Near the pub, flowers could only be bought in one spot, near the cemetery. From a cemetery florist, they learned that there was a man buying daisies on weekends. This man asked the florist to look after the tomb of Mark Stern, one of the few Jews executed by Nazis, who was not buried in a mass grave. Detectives established that before the war, Stern was a renowned reznik, a specialist in kosher butchering. Searching the meat outlets led detectives to a shipping agent, Nathan Neischuller, from Zhytomyr. The entries made in shipping documents proved that his handwriting was identical to the one on the postcard. Neischuller was detained on his way to the butcher's grave. One of the detectives recalled seeing Neischuller wandering by the beer joint on the first day of the investigation. The brooch found in Neishuller's apartment during the search was presented to him at the interrogation. It belonged to the murdered Margarita. The suspect said that previously it had been his mother's brooch. No mistake, a handmade jewelry piece with a glass replacing one missing emerald. In the 1930s, when Nathan was a teen, he extracted the precious stone to help famine victims. Being at the front line, he got a letter from his niece telling him what happened to that brooch. The niece said their family was blackmailed by a young lady named Margot, who demanded gold or she would turn them all in to the Gestapo. This Margot had a flower tattooed on her stomach. Nathan's mother gave her everything, yet Margot brought Nazis to their place. Nathan never thought he'd happen to meet this mysterious Margot. One day he came to a beer joint for a drink and saw his mother's brooch pinned to the bartender's blouse. Customers called her Margarita, which sounded very similar to the name Margot. Nathan decided to get closer to the woman to learn more about her. He wanted to produce an impression on Margarita, so he paid a local frequenter to get her a bouquet of daisies. Neischuller paid several visits to Margot and he was taking time. Once, he brought a bottle of brandy, a box of chocolates, and a bouquet of daisies. After a drink, Margot went on to kiss him. Nathan unbuttoned her blouse and saw the tattoo. It was definitely her. He took a knife and skillfully cut her throat just like old Jewish butcher Mark Stern taught him. He tore the brooch off the blouse and left the pub. Nathan Neischuller was sentenced to 3 years in prison for the committed murder. Upon his release, he moved to the far east of the USSR, where his track was lost.